Hey guys, time for some more tutorials, and my name is Magnet. We're going to be looking at playing the late game in Zerg versus Terran today, and mostly we want to focus on what your goals should be in the late game, how you can switch your compositions, and ultimately most of the time the ways you're going to win in the late game is by starving a Terran out, not letting them mine anymore, and finally getting that one big fight to where they just can't replenish and you can. So we're going to look at ways to kind of get there and what you're supposed to do when you get there. Mostly the ways you're going to get there is just by neither player being able to kill each other. There's nothing too fancy in this matchup as far as like ways that you need to purposefully shift. Both players get into this really mid-game focused type of play where they both just try and kill each other for a long time and nothing happens. So let's take a look at these games. This first one's going to be Snoot versus Jockji. We've talked a lot about having to deal with the openers from both of these. We won't worry too much about that. And if you need more information on that, then check out the playlist, which is linked down in the description. I have all sorts of videos that you'll probably find useful. This particular game, Jockji is going to open up with a little bit of a bunker rush. This is a weird situation, and we'll talk about this a lot more in the future. But I guess for the time being, don't pay too much attention to this. Hopefully by the time you watch this, I'll already have a video that's out that's talking about this. So either way, you just basically need to get this spine up and prevent it from going down. And then this will turn into a normal game once you get your spine crawler rooted and enough Zerglings out. So nothing too crazy. This is actually fairly common in this matchup. And behind this, usually Terran's going to go for extra command centers and try to make this into a longer game. So there he's already sending his barracks home. Nothing too big to worry about. We mostly want to focus on when the game gets super late. So we're going to watch most of this on fast forward. So extra spines here, nothing too crazy. Zergling speed's always, of course, something that you want to get. And just to be clear, most of the time in this matchup, Terrans are going to run with a very bio or marine-centric strategy, and Zergs typically run with a more Baneling, Zergling, and Mutalisk-focused strategy with double upgrades on the Zerglings, so melee and Carapace upgrades. You can see those on the way right now. And eventually, like I said, there isn't something too fancy about getting into the late game. It's usually just because the Terran attacks over and over and over and over and neither player dies. So this is if you get into that type of situation, what you're going to want to probably start looking out for as far as ways you can transition and get an advantage in that, rather than continuing just to try to not die for the rest of the game. So, like we've talked about a lot of times before as well, after the harassments is going to be the first timing that comes out. It's usually with the medevacs. So you should have Banelings and stuff on the field to deal with this. It shouldn't be too much of damage that you should take. So Jockji's actually doing pretty well here, and the Baneling speed is like ridiculously late here for Snoot, so he's going to have a little bit of a hard time holding this off. You can see he just barely started it, but he does have 1-1 on his Ling, so that's pretty good. Now dealing with drops here, this is also something that you need to be worried about because drops can eventually wear you down. So even going as far as putting up like static defenses at your bases is not a bad idea. Of course, Mutalisks are going to be the ultimate way that you push those away, so Mutalisks in the later stages of the game are going to be really good at stopping plays like this. It can be really annoying. But he'll eventually hold this, like I'm talking, I mean, this whole video is about late game. It's not like he's going to die right now, so a little bit of a spoiler that those drops won in the game. So taking a fourth base is Snoot, and most of the ways you're going to win is by having so many bases and keeping them protected from drops and whatnot, while also denying bases from your opponent. And this is the main thing we're going to see here from Snoot. It's not usually about compositions. Most of the time Terrans can resist that if they know what they're doing. We'll talk a little bit about that, but another little push-up here. Again, engaging this properly with Banelings and Zerglings and not getting too clumped up against these mines is going to be the keys to getting into the later stage of the game. We're seeing another little bit of an engagement here. Jockji's splitting pretty well. You don't want to overcommit too hard, and especially not off creep. So more Banelings on the way here. We'll eventually hold this, no problem. The biggest factor here, though, in getting into the late game is keeping up on your upgrades. Like, this is something that a lot of Zergs start to neglect. And if Terran ever gets really far ahead in their upgrades, you can see right now Snoot's about to be a full set of upgrades ahead. That's really, really good for you. If you're ever ahead a set of upgrades, you should start being really aggressive with that. But if you start to fall behind, that's when the Marines will just rip up everything because you can't deal with them and because their damage output is so high. So keeping up on upgrades is one of the most important things as far as surviving until the late game. So yeah, that's my story. Burrow on the way as well as more mines. Burrow is also going to be a really important tactic as the game goes on, and we'll take a look at a little bit of that. Snoot's one of the more well-known players for using burrowed banelings, so that should be pretty cool as that comes up to that point. I wouldn't say we're officially in the late game until Terran starts thinking about taking a 4th base. So we're still kind of in the mid game at this point, and this is what most of the engagements are going to kind of look like, especially at high levels, is that the Terran will be trying to avoid taking damage from the banelings, and you'll just be trying to blow up his whole army with the banelings. And if you go for this mutalist style, which, I mean, it's really the safest style for a reason, because you can prevent drops and stuff. So, like I was talking about, you also need to be prepared to defend against a lot of Terran harassment, because little drops and random run-bys and stuff like this can be hard to deal with. So I really would not be too opposed to just adding on little bits of extra static defense just to buy time for your army to get over there. And then you usually want to deal with those by just splitting off part of your army, maybe like a handful of banelings and some zerglings to deal with that, and then eventually the mutas to sweep up and clear up the drop ships. So, I mean, we'll probably talk about that in other videos as well, but something you should at least keep your mind on if you want to focus on the late game, because there won't be a late game if you die too early. So again, continuing to build up here. As you can see, Jockji's upgrades are pretty late. Drilling claws are on the way for the mines. More engagements are going to start coming down here. And once Jockji starts to think about taking a 4th base, which he does have the command center on the way, is when I would start to say that this is in the late game. The late game kind of can last for quite a while, but the biggest point to note here is that these battles will still look the same for a long time. It'll still often be Marines trying to microwave from banelings for a long time. But now that the burrow is done, this is where you can start to get advantages in this stage of the game. If you can ever lure them over a burrowed baneling trap like this and blow up a whole bunch of Marines for just 2 banelings, that's going to be a big way to just end the game and not even have to play into late game. So we're going to see that be a little bit of a theme as time goes on here. So he's trying to bait the Marines over this. Unfortunately, doesn't quite get the connections that he wanted. He's still engaging like we were seeing before. Baneling's trying to blow everything up. Zergling's engaging in, trying not to take too much damage from the mines. The mutalists will eventually clean up the dropships here. Now from this point, let's say you win a fight at this stage in the game. If this game goes on for longer and you keep trying to attack into him, he'll probably have mine reinforcements, he might have planetaries around the place. Trying to break him at this point can be pretty hard. So that's why most of these games will end by just starving him out. So if you can block this base, if you can block this base, maybe with the burrowed zergling, that's why burrow is so good. Maybe you can poop some creep from your overlord to prevent it from landing for a while. Any tactics that you can use from preventing them to mine from their 4th base and beyond is going to be the best way that you actually win the late game. So that's what you should start to think about at this stage of the game. Once Terran starts to think about taking their 4th base, about 17 minutes or so. Again, if you try to attack in here too hard, the Terran should be able to recover and push this off most of the time. So you can see that starting to happen now as he gets a lot of mines and Marines and stuff rallied forward. Just killing yourself in there like that is kind of silly, so yeah, don't kill yourself is the motto. My knowledge is infinite. So we can see more burrowed baneling traps around the map, and this is again something that you want to keep an eye on. Here's the overlord poop creep, or creep pooping to prevent that. There's also a burrowed ling at the other base. We can start seeing all that start to flesh out. And this takes Terran quite a while to expand here, and then you also know if this gets cleared out that they're trying to expand there. You can use some harassment tactics around the map here. And this is where the mutas really start to get important, is you can start to move their army around back and forth around the map and starve them out by killing off SCVs or killing off command centers and stuff. He's not really committing to an attack here. And the other thing is that with these burrowed banelings, if you start to get attacked too hard and he recovers, you can kind of lure him into these traps and land some pretty good connections if you can get that far. We'll fast forward just a little bit. You can see mutas coming down here to try and prevent this base from landing, trying to prevent him from mining over there. So the starving out process has begun. And also, once you get into the late game, you still do need to keep up on these upgrades. So you'll want to add in the infestation pit, grab your hive, and get this 3-3 on the way. It's really important. Here's some more of the harassment tactics that Jockji's using to try and end the game in his favor. So Snoot needs to be on top of cleaning up these drops fairly regularly. We can also see that the burrowed banelings haven't really done a whole lot yet. And if you can ever catch this army out in bad positions where you can get good baneling connections, then you'll be in great shape. Now he reveals the burrow, unfortunately, so he gets those 2 banelings killed, so that kind of sucks. But again, this is what I'd still call the late game. But even still, these battles are still looking the same. The compositions are still looking the same. He's still having to clean up drops and whatnot. So this can last for quite a while. It's not like you just shift into Hive tech and all of a sudden it's late game. It's a very gradual process. see those two banelings got killed. I'm not sure why he detonated those. That was kind of silly, but Jockey's still trying to seek position here. Snoot's still just trying to keep him away. Eventually he'll want to start to expand up to these bases up here, which is why he's clearing out that Marine. He can expand up here as well. And as the game goes on, you definitely want to expand away from the Terran, so it takes them longer to get to your bases. There's still going to be drops and stuff like this on the other side of the map, which is why you really probably want to have static defenses back here, like spores and spine crawlers and whatnot, as you can afford it. And you'll notice that Snoot's bank is enormous, so there's really no reason why he shouldn't be able to afford that, as long as he replaces the drones. So shouldn't be a big deal. So still just trying to clean up drops here. Jockey again multi-pronging once again, but as long as you can deal with this, okay. You'll notice he's not sending in his whole army against the mines, because you don't want to throw away your whole army, just sending in a few banelings at a time. Still just trying to deal with this the best he can, and eventually this army will be able to rally over there and stop it. So we're still getting into the late game here, but Snoot's focus still needs to be preventing mining off of this base. And you can't start focusing on that until you push off these attacks, so you still definitely need to clean these up. And fast forward a little bit, you can see the base is going to go down, but even still he cleans up the attack, which allows him opportunities to get on the other side of the map. Maybe start trying to deny bases here. Maybe he could run some banelings in here or something and try to kill a bunch of workers. It's really just about stopping the Terran from mining at this point. Also, if you were able to keep up on your macro and you're able to trade efficiently, check out Snoot's bank. His bank is huge, and Jockey has nothing because Jockey's spending all of his army to try and desperately stop these bases from mining, whereas Snoot is fairly effortlessly cleaning them up. So your bank in the late game is a big deal, which is why you also need to keep up on your injects, keep up on expanding. Just keep that Zerg machine going. You still need to be mining, injecting, making units, stopping attacks, stuff like that. And then your focus after that, once you've done all that, is obviously preventing these bases. Still some random baneling traps around the map, by the way, and we'll talk about more baneling trap stuff in a different video, but we'll fast forward here. Now we're at the point where the Hive tech starts to come into play. The 3-3's on the way, and the Ultralisk Cavern's on the way. A lot of players do like to start supplementing their army with Ultralisks, considering they take a lot of effort to kill. And the idea with the compositions here, if you get to this stage of the game, is that if you put out Ultralisks, they're going to have to start switching into Marauders to deal with that. And if they switch so far into Marauders, you can start morphing your Spire into a greater Spire and get into Broodlords, making all those Marauders worthless. That's one of the more rare ways of winning this. If you want to just go for straight up compositions, you won't see that very often at the pro levels. I would also really consider adding in Infestors before adding in the Ultralisks, because if you can ever get really good connections with your banelings on fungal units that can't move, then that'll basically end the game in your favor, because you're going to kill the army so efficiently that you can just walk over there and kill them right afterwards. So there's a lot of other ways that you can do this, but a lot of pros will just get into Ultralisks, and the Ultralisks are really good at taking down planetaries, so that's another reason why they go that far. But I would really like to see more and more people going for pathogen glands and infestors first, just because there's so many different opportunities to win games and even to harass with infestors that Ultralisks don't really offer. So that's something to consider as well. But that's what we're seeing from Snoot. The Hive tech is on the way, and this is officially going late game because Jockey's starting to be a lot more passive and having to stay home and wait longer and longer on his reinforcements, because Snoot is on so many bases right now, and Jockey is on still 4. You can see his main is starting to mine out. His natural is pretty close to mining out as well. He just needs to continue to stop these attacks here, not take too much damage. You can see there's also some drops coming up right now, so you need to be able to stop those. And again, static defenses are something that you really need, and it's something that I have to really criticize Snoot for not doing. So he's had more than enough money to put these up here. And if Terran can keep the bases equalized while you're trying to starve them out, then all of a sudden that doesn't matter too much. By the way, there was a decent baneling connection right there. Killed a handful of Marines, not too many. But still, the drops are underway. You need to find a way to deal with those. So there's multiple drops out here, actually. And there's also an attack coming up here. So things can get pretty rough here in the late game. So you need to definitely be on top of managing multiple battles at the same time. Also, this Cavern did get killed, by the way, so Ultralisks are going to be pretty late onto this fight. This is why I say that these battles are going to look the same for quite a long time, as he's still using banelings and stuff to try and prevent these attacks. So, yeah. Ultralisk finally does show up, even though the Cavern did get killed. He was managed to squeeze 1 or 2 out of there. But you definitely need to find ways to keep up on these drops. It's one of the worst things to deal with in the late game. And it just harkens right back to the static defenses. So, fast forwarding once again. And now Snoot is being really aggressive about taking bases around the map. You can see he's just taking hatcheries everywhere. because he wants to be able to have points to mine from. If he ever loses a couple of bases and he has no mining, then all of a sudden you can't win. But now he's going to focus on preventing these other bases here. We'll note that earlier this burrowed Zergling had prevented a base from trying to land. Some Marines came over and he killed the Marines. Now he's killing the bases trying to float over there, and Zhakji's still pinned down on these 4 bases. And the longer he's pinned down on these 4 bases and the rest of that continues to mine out, the harder and harder time he's going to have continuing to produce units later into this game. So definitely the starving out style and preventing all these attacks is really strong against Terran. Now I know this is a late game video and it's going to be pretty long considering there's quite a lot to talk about and quite a lot to watch. But I'm going to fast forward for just a little bit because we've seen these battles so many times. Now the Ultralists are starting to show up just a little bit, and they're really good against Marine packs and stuff. So the Ultralists do have utility, but they are a little bit slow and a little bit clunky. And ultimately his focus needs to be denying the space once again. So if you ever push off an attack, your immediate focus should be going to deny a base like this. So this stupid burrowed Zergling is still blocking this base. It's so annoying for Terran to deal with stuff like that. So you can see the usefulness that that has. But again, having to deal with these drops, getting really irritating, but the mutalist count is actually insane. 34 mutas out right now. And that's the whole usefulness of them as the game goes on. With this burrowed Ling, he can also still see that the command center is floating over here and that he wants to take that base. So that'll mean that he knows where the army is, he knows if there's any support right there, and he can come over there and kill it if there's nothing there. Finally, the Terran's able to land the base, but Snoot knows what's going on. He's just going to fly right in there right away and try to kill this base. Of course, you don't want to get too aggressive against this many Marines and maybe a Thor or something, so you would still do want to be careful. You can take these battles. This is where the Ultralists start to come in as well, and oh my god, that's a lot of Banelings. 37 Banelings on the way. And that's definitely enough to kill a base like this, and it's definitely worth it to spend that much money killing a base like this if the Terran just can't mine in the late game. So, Ultralists crashing in here, trying to eat some mine shots. The Banelings just kill everything as they blow down the base. The base has to lift off. It kills all the Marines and SCVs here. And yeah, all of a sudden Zhakji can't mine again. He's still pinned down to just barely mining on this, considering he did take some damage. This base is basically mined out. This base is basically mined out. All of a sudden Zhakji's economy is terrible, and if you can keep this up, your trades can get worse and worse, and you'll still be in good shape. So that's about it for this game. Eventually Snoot just gets enough stuff up and kills one more push from Zhakji, and that ends the game. But note the map here, that he's just continuing to take bases that he can fall back to if his other ones get killed. And the fact that he's able to defend these drops well enough and crush these attacks and then prevent mining, that's really what's putting him into a good position here. So let's check out one more game here, and we'll try to make this a little more brief because this is running a little bit long. It's going to be kind of more of the same stuff, but this is going to be a lot more focused on actually killing the bases and actually keeping the SCV count low rather than just defending attacks. So this time we're going to be talking about Pult versus Revival, and this is more of a longer term type of style. It's not like, Snoot's style that entire game was really just to defend the attacks, defend the drops, and then keep him from mining on more than 4 bases. This kind of has the same connotation, but Revival's a lot more aggressive about it. So I want to show you guys that aggression can really help out as far as leading into a late game that favors you. So watching the openers from both of these guys, nothing too crazy. Looks like Pult wants to go for a Reaper, which is really normal. Again, we've talked about that at length, so check out the associated videos if that's the case. I'm going to be saying this a lot from now on, but we're getting to the point where there's a lot of information out there that we've already gone over. So if you really need that, there's also other videos. There's no reason for me to make the same video several times. So Reapers coming in here, more command centers. Third command center on the way anyway. Factory, so Hellions coming up here. Definitely don't want to die to stuff like this. And I don't know what else to say. Maybe I should just tell a story while we wait for this game to charge up. But I guess we can just sit here and kind of watch the production tabs and make sure that nothing unusual comes across. But TVZ is pretty standard. Third base on the way now here from Revival. He's going to start pushing his creep out here, and creep is definitely a very important mechanic, so you know when and where attacks are coming from. Banshee's on the way, just with Cloak, just to make sure that he can try and deal a little bit more damage to the Zerg. Baneling Nest on the way, like we'd expect. Layers on the way. It's going to be shortly followed up by a Spire, Baneling Speed, 1-1, all that good stuff to try and get yourself set up for the remainder of the game. See some Spores are coming down to defend against these Banshees, nothing too wild. Pult's getting Stim, getting his upgrades as well, so you definitely don't want to fall behind on the upgrades too far. It is kind of common for Terran to be a little bit ahead in upgrades, but if you can ever get that advantage, that's going to be great for you. Here comes the Spire. Baneling speed's almost done. Revival's in good shape here. Holt getting the armory just to continue his upgrades, and we're going to, again, just fast forward pretty hard until the point where we're at the late game when this starts to matter. So, Holt's going to be starting to add on another factory here, so that's kind of interesting. Going for a little bit heavier support against all the Zerg units. Slow this down just a tiny, tiny bit. See Hellions starting to rally out, killing the Changelings. Lots of Banelings and stuff on the field just to prevent Polt from getting too far out on the map. Note the creep spread in this game is craziness. Like, he can see most of the map already. Like, Polt leaves his base and he's already in creep. That's really good for Revival, really good to surround these types of armies, so just crushing attacks like this is going to be really strong. Here we go. Here it begins. This is Revival setting himself up for the style that he wants to play throughout this game. Rather than worrying so much about crushing attacks like this, he's going to worry more about keeping Polt down on SCVs for most of the game. And this can play out into late game as well. It's a good way to get to late game. It's to try and keep Terran back in their base so that you're actually dealing the damage rather than them. So Revival's just going to go straight in here. The Terran tries to recover. He's going to have to try and recover through Banelings and stuff. So Revival can be really aggressive here. He obviously has to fight off of creep, which can be a disadvantage, but considering he should have already killed a decent number of SCVs, that can be worth it. So he still cleans up that attack, but the attack took place on Polt's side of the map. And right now, Revival's in a decent economic position. This can be a theme throughout this game here, and he's going to mostly focus on preventing Polt from ever taking a fourth base rather than a third. So being super aggressive with the counterattacks and being super aggressive as far as fighting the Terran on their side of the map is going to be a really good way to do this. You can see Polt starting to mix in Thors. He has some Marauders mixed in there as well. Again, just making the same type of composition but using it a little bit differently as Revival. And he does have the spotting over here, and he is pooping creep on this fourth base location to know when that's going to happen. And again, he's just setting up for more counterattacks. He's not just waiting for the Terran to come into him. And if Polt ever leaves his base, then Revival is just going to immediately counter and punish him for being out on the map. So Blue Flame on the way for Polt. More upgrades from Revival's mutas. Going around here picking off mines here and there the best he can. Takes a huge Thor shot. Ouch, that hurts. But still doing alright. 3-3 on the way for the Terran. This is about the time, maybe 16 minutes, where you're going to want to add your infestation pit and think about getting into Hive tech. You can see that he has the money for it if he wanted to do that right now. And since he's going for this counterattack style, he's not going to be too reliant on too many Banelings and stuff to defend against these types of attacks. Obviously, they'll be the best tool here, but a lot of times, he's going to get the Terran in the bad position because he's forcing the Terran to move somewhere that doesn't want to. So Terran's continuing to push up here, clearing out some creep. You can see Revival's just kind of waiting for a good time to attack into this, or he can always counterattack, maybe with his Mutalisk or something. But we'll have to see what he wants to do. This time he's opting to try and get us around here. As you can see, part of his army's over here on the side, whereas the other part is very spread out. So Revival's covering basically half the map here. Taking an extra base is Revival, and you definitely want to try and expand away from the Terran as much as possible. So even though you might lose these bases, which will eventually happen in this game, still, it's worth it to get the Terran to move over to the wrong side of the map. So Polt's coming down here trying to stop this. Obviously killing a lot of Banelings here in the process. This is a ton of Banelings. Here's the infestation pit on the way now. So pretty decent timing here from Revival. Can't complain about that too much. A lot more Banelings on the way. He just needs to crush this attack and kind of reset the Terran's composition so he can start harassing a little bit more. The fourth base is now coming down though, and this is when his focus needs to start shifting to start trying to starve Polt out. So he's going to be a lot more aggressive about preventing that here in the near future. And he should know about it because his Overlord got cleared quite a while ago. As you can see, the creep has already receded. And he's immediately going over there right now and just being like, okay, well, if you want to take this base, you're going to have to really work for it. I have so many Banelings here that if you try to attack into me too hard, then the Banelings are going to wreck your day. So he's just really trying to get position right now on this base without Polt being there to deflect him. So we'll fast forward just a little bit. And just, I guess, waiting for Revival to make his move here. Sometimes these can take a little while, trying to get the right position. He's starting to split up his army a little bit, so maybe he can get pulled on the wrong side of the map while he counterattacks into that planetary. So we're going to see that come up here in just a second. And in the meantime, notice his counterattacks, trying to keep his SCV count low, is what Revival wants to focus on this game. There's also the counterattack coming in from behind, and this is so many banelings that you could click on this command center, but it's better just to kind of walk them around and let the command center kill itself by killing the banelings while the banelings get in as far as possible, so he prevents that base. The mutalisks are here in the main killing a whole lot, and from Revival standpoint, this not only keeps Pult on his side of the map so you can take more of these bases, but it further cements his economic lead and further puts Pult into a desperate scenario where he absolutely needs to get this base secured or he's going to die. So there's a lot of stuff going on here from Revival. This is a really good way to play this out. I know this game is a lot longer. There's not really a whole lot more that happens in this game other than Revival just continually denies his base over and over, as you can see that happening again. He eventually will get into Ultralisks and start supplementing that to take down planetaries and whatnot. There also is a little bit of a counterattack over here, so you do need to be willing to pull your army back and deal with that if you have to. But this game, or rather this video, has already gone on for pretty long, and I don't want to re-drill the same concepts over and over too hard. If you want to watch the rest of this replay, you can download the replay pack from WCS Season 1, just in there, so check that out. But I hope you guys at least enjoyed the concepts behind this video and kind of gave you a good idea of what you're going to want to shoot for when aiming for a late game victory, or if you just happen to get there. So yeah, I'll be back for more videos very soon, so take it easy, and I'll see you later.